What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast, episode 19. Today is a basic book review because I've given my ideas and my beliefs on the medical establishment many times, and I've told many people, not only on the podcast but in person, many times that I think your best bet to remain healthy is to take it into your own hands as much as possible and to avoid the doctor's office, not to go in for thorough examinations and consistently ask them what your issues are whenever you're going through a setback or a symptom or any kind of ailment, or even just proactively testing to see what's going on with yourself all the time. I have issues with blood work. I think there are issues that are known with blood work, but the entire premise of somebody fixing you and being able to fix you, I have an issue with it because we're all individuals, so much so. And it brings a question that I have a lot of the times for my friends and family is, how many times would you allow somebody to lie to your face or to be mistaken about things that they've been pretty steadfast in sharing with you before you would kind of disregard what their opinions are or what they're saying? And if you're in a relationship and somebody's lying to your face, I think it's pretty quickly to hinder that relationship. It's going to hurt your standing with that other person, and it's going to hurt their standing in your eyes and your thought processes. Let's be honest. If somebody claims to be an expert about something and then they're proven to be wrong over and over, and they make ridiculous statements over and over, you're going to lose respect for that person's opinion. And even if you have no choice but to keep them in your life, you're going to let it go in one ear and out the other. So with doctors, I have nothing against doctors. Look, I think most doctors went into the profession in the first place to help people and probably had their heart in the right place. You know, some for sure went in just to make money, and there are incentivized actions that they take that are, in my opinion, preposterous. They are absolutely ridiculous. The prescriptions, we overprescribe, obviously, across the board, and they are incentivized to prescribe across the board. And I do have issues with that, and I think there's a lot of doctors that have issues with that, that have pointed out the flaws in the system and the flaws in how these things are funded in the first place and how much they learn about them, and then how they're utilized within an office and in practice. But, and look, you're going to go to a doctor when, let's say, you need stitches. You cut yourself open, or you break a arm. You're going to go to a doctor, get the bone set. You're going to go in for stitches. You're going to go in for trauma like that. And that's perfectly acceptable and no duh, all right? But internal issues that they think they figured out, many times we've seen throughout just our lifetimes, they were wrong. They're absolute wrong. And the treatments that they prescribed and the way that they went about fixing things was absolutely wrong. The advice they've given, dietary advice, is horrendous. It has been horrendous, and it's still horrendous. They have not figured that out. Let's be honest. They don't learn much about nutrition. And those that do kind of stray away from what the curriculums actually instruct them to do and what they've been told to do and how they've been told to teach or advise. You shouldn't go to your doctor for advice on what to eat. In my opinion, most are misguided. And that's a really, really nice way to say it. Look, they've tried really hard to present information that they were presented in the way that they were presented, and I'll give them that. But the authorities that are in charge of the FDA and the food pyramid, the people that were actually the experts advising our experts, were off and have been off, and that's absolutely not deniable. But there's a great book I think everybody should check out if you're interested in the subject. Actually, there's several. and I'll probably end up doing several book reviews on the subject when it comes down to it. Look, I went carnivore for a good amount of time, and it served me extremely well. I think elimination diet like that can serve many people well. And even if you don't stick to it rigorously after the fact, I think you will eliminate some things from your life that you wouldn't have prior if you didn't give yourself a break from them in the first place. Carbs, I'm being pretty specific on a lot of them, and a lot of vegetables that you'd be surprised aren't really serving you well. And of course, all the processed garbage that we consume in the U.S. and around the world. But the U.S. is particularly off on what we deem as food. In the grocery store, I think the first time I heard your safest bet is to go to the outside aisles only and avoid all the middle aisles. And when you think about it, that really it makes a lot of sense, because all the processed garbage, all the things in boxes, and the subsidized crops and crappy materials that people are using to make profit, and flavoring to just all get out, are in the middle aisles. So with that in mind, vegetables defend themselves, plants defend themselves against predation. There are toxic chemicals within them, and within most of them, that illustrate they do not want to be eaten. It's even different than fruit. Fruit, they drop their seeds from their plants, and that's how they would reproduce. Is something would come along, eat them, move their seed, and then another plant would pop up and more fruit would come. So I'm a seasonal fruit eater. I think it makes sense that, especially if you're closer to the equator in the heat of summer, you're getting structured water from a lot of those fruit. And it does make sense that fruit is a part of our diet. But most of the vegetables in the grocery store now aren't what they originally were. They're just not. They're GMOs. They've been hybridized. They've been monocropped, and they've been ridden with pesticides. And just the process of actual agriculture now compared to what it was 100 years ago is night and day. So there are a lot of things in the grocery store and even in the produce section that we weren't eating 100 years ago and do not have the effects that we are supposed to be desiring from eating, from fueling ourselves. We'll get into the carnivore thing and to the fats and to the misinformation about food later, but specifically I want to talk about doctors today. Because, like I asked, how many times would you let somebody lie to your face before you started to disregard what their information or their opinions were? And we have seen in our lifetimes that doctors were wrong repeatedly. The history of science is most scientists being wrong about most things most of the time. This is science. This is based upon science, a lot of it. And a lot of it is based upon profit and funding. With that said, there's just a lot of information that they got really wrong and that they are still getting really wrong. Cholesterol, the statin drugs, and the prescription of these things to lower your cholesterol is absolutely unbelievable, and it's a huge problem. It is a huge problem. If you're on statin drugs, do some diligent research on cholesterol on statin drugs. That's point blank advice that I give my father and anybody that has ever come across me in conversation with it. It's cholesterol is needed. Your brain needs cholesterol. Your skin needs cholesterol. I'm sure I have high cholesterol, and I'm going to live with it, and I'm going to be happy with it, and I'm not going to go test to see if my cholesterol is high so that somebody can prescribe a drug for me to lower it. Anyways, this book, Lies My Doctor Told Me, there are some quotes in here I want to go over, I want to share. But I think you should check out the book. I mean, Ken Berry, he's done a great job with this one. There's many cited sources in here that will lead you into other books and other studies. And there's a ton of research here. It's all valid because it does really trigger the thought process of how many times am I going to trust the experts that are continuously wrong and are actually giving kind of the worst advice possible for a lot of people. In his preface, I'm going to share a bunch of quotes now. And it's preface, a French proverb: "The doctor is more to be feared than the disease." And we see that is so true now, because these people that have gone to this expert for an internal remedy and have been prescribed a medication have caused another issue, and they were prescribed another medication for that issue, and then another issue would arise and they were prescribed another medicine. We have a country full of people that are absolutely dependent upon pharmaceuticals that were not curing them or addressing the ailment, if there was an ailment in the first place. And it's an issue. It's a problem. It's a bigger problem as the poison that we're consuming, that we're calling food. And look, comfort food is one of those subjects that I've gone over before. Things that make you feel good, things that make you feel like you're at home, things that, you know, are probably not that great for you in the grand scheme of things, but have some value because of the effect on our mind. I'm sorry, the stuff from Nabisco and processed garbage that's not comfort food. And it's not good for us. And we need to avoid it at all costs. I dream of a future when people are educated and informed to the point where these products that are completely just profit pushing products are eliminated from our diets, where people refuse to eat fake food and refuse to eat chemicals, a bunch of garbage chemicals that are processed and made to withstand the test of time within packaging and do us no service. All right. The quotes, there's a few. I'm going to go through them. Robert Mendelsohn said, "The reason doctors are so dangerous is that they believe in what they are doing." There's a lot of truth in that, because they do share this information as if it's factual, as if these remedies that are not remedies are remedies. And it's a shame. It's a shame. It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. Richard Feynman. This, I'm going to go on a tangent just for a second, goes back to the biggest wormhole that I've ever gone down personally, and what took me years. I absolutely was so critical of the persons who presented this theory to me in the first place. But when the flat earth thing came along, I was already a conspiracy theorist, and I was already outside the fringe and thought to be out of my mind by most people for my views on 9/11, for my views on our government, for my views on consensus on a lot of subjects. But the flat earth thing, it took me years. It took me literally 2+ years of mocking and ridiculing the persons that shared this information with me, or shared that they believed in their idea that Earth was not a globe. It blew my mind. I literally, I would never say I was triggered by it or that I was upset by it, but I laughed at them. I did. I ridiculed them and mocked them a little bit, like, you have to be way out there to even entertain this. And they stuck with it to their guns so fervently and so strongly. I admired it, but I wanted to debunk them. I wanted to go back and prove to them via experiment and via fact and studies that they were wrong and they were out of their mind to entertain this. Well, when I actually took that approach, when I said, fine, I'm going to look at this nonsense, legitimately look at this insane, preposterous idea. When I took that approach, I couldn't help but start noticing some things that aligned with my senses, that aligned with the reality I was exposed to my entire life, because my entire life, I've walked on a flat surface and I didn't feel like I was being hurled through space. And I had valid scientific reasoning for that. Of course, what we were taught in school, I believed that, what we were taught was real because I was taught that so young. I couldn't possibly have, questioned gravity when I was 15, 14 years old, because gravity, is, as it was taught, just made sense to me. Of course, density and these other things that came up made sense to me the way they were taught to me as well. And this one subject, the turning point in the subject for me was the curvature and the mathematics for the spherical Earth, the actual curvature of the Earth, which it doesn't align with experiment. There are laser experiments, there are sight experiments, there are view experiments through long lenses, like the Nikon P90 or whatever it is. And it just doesn't align with experiment. So you entertain it strongly enough and openly enough, and then you come to that first initial conclusion. Well, it's kind of proving that the math isn't right, or the curve isn't there. Which is it? Is Earth much larger than what we were taught and to believe? Or is the curvature non-existent? And you go through that process, down that wormhole, step by step by step, and you see enough experiment to debunk the claims that you were taught initially. And it doesn't matter what you thought. It doesn't matter what you were taught. It does not matter that you were programmed. You have to undo that programming when you analyze these other experiments that coincide with the reality. The curvature is non-existent. And I know people are not ready for this. Most people are not ready for this conversation or to entertain the idea that the Earth is flat. But my friends, they lied about the curvature. They either didn't know and were drastically off in proportions, or it didn't exist to begin with. And when you look at the experiments and the distances that have been measured to have zero curvature, and you cannot explain that away, it doesn't matter what you believe, because you have to address the lie and the lies. So, yes, that was a tangent, and I will go into flat Earth. I will go into the missing curvature in another long form podcast or several, because it's fascinating to me. And even if it doesn't matter, if we have no conclusions on this in our lifetimes, it's still fascinating. I as much as I fought the possibility of entertaining it, as soon as I did get into it enough that I was like, hold up, they've presented a lot of arguments here that really make sense. And then the curvature really was the tipping point for me, to where I was like, all right, how would all these engineers, all these scientists, all of these experts, how would they all be involved in this conspiracy? But there's ways to figure that one out too. And consensus brings me to this quote, actually. Does history record any case in which the majority was right? Robert A. Heinlein. Does history record any case in which the majority was right? Consensus is a con. I couldn't believe it with the whole flat Earth thing. I was like, all the pilots are involved. No, their instrumentation and the way that they're taught leaves out some very, very important questions. And there's more and more pilots, if you go and look online, that are saying, yeah, it's a flat pancake out there. I never adjust my plane's nose. It's a pancake. It's flat as it gets for a long, long haul. We'll get into flat Earth. Let's get back to doctors and how my doctor was wrong, how your doctor was wrong, and why. All right, I firmly believe that if the whole materia medica could be sunk to the bottom of the sea, it would be all the better for mankind and all the worst for the fishes. Oliver Wendell Holmes. I believe it too. Because if you had no expert to run to when you had internal ailment, if you only had the inner voice to deal with, if you only had this innate wisdom to function, I believe that you would have to either be faithful and have the faith that you are going to remedy your current dilemma, or you would have fear, and fear would plague you, and fear would corrupt you, and fear would probably be your downfall. And I believe we saw that during COVID, that a lot of people chose faith and lived their lives as they had their entire lives, without the fear of the unknown and without the fear of what people were putting into their heads and into their ideas, and they were just fine. And the people that lived in fear ran out and got the vaccine, and ran out and they wore the mask, and they didn't go out, they stayed home, they trapped themselves indoors and didn't breathe fresh air and lived in a constant state of fear, and they drove around with their mask alone by themselves. And that is absolutely not harboring a healthy environment. That is polluting your own environment. All right, the specialist is too commonly hypertrophied in one direction and atrophied in all the rest. Martin Fisher. All right, atrophy. When you neglect an area, I've dealt with this in my own life. My back, my posterior chain, when I was working as a fit model, when I was working on sets and I was doing nothing but the poses, and I wasn't really taking care of my full system the way I should. I had biceps and I had the normal workout muscles. I hit the treadmill and I would do bench press and some things. But I allowed certain muscle groups in my body to atrophy. Not only did they not get worked out and exercised enough that they would keep sustaining the muscle that they had, the muscle started to die in those areas, and it started to just feel like it wasn't needed. And I dealt with those issues, not severely, but really uncomfortably over a couple of years, when I decided to go really take care of myself and get my full body functioning the way it should. Training jujitsu, we're doing different balance training, working out. When I got off the paddle boards, where I was using the front side of my shoulders and my chest, and I started surfing, my body changed and I started to readapt to the demands I was placing on it. People ask me why I wear these shirts, demand adaptation. It's because I came up with a training philosophy when I was paddleboarding and when I was trying to get out in the ocean in an environment that I wasn't used to. And I really started to train myself wholeheartedly to sustain in a new environment. And all I can say is that the overwhelming effect it had on my physiology, on my body, was life-changing. It introduced me to the idea that if I were placing new demands on my body, that my body would adapt and I would be rapidly progressing, not only performing, but in my abilities, in my capabilities. So I was working on balance boards, and I don't know if you've ever tried an endo board or a little voodoo board. You stand on it one of the first times and that thing will shoot out from underneath you. It'll really mess you up if you're not careful. And most people that do try them the first couple times are like, "Oh, this is crazy." But if you stick with it, because you're putting new demands on your body, you will start to notice absolute rapid progression. And progression every single time you put yourself back in that unstable environment. So you're placing new demands upon your body, and your body is acclimating and adapting as you go. And the rewards in that process are unbelievable. That's why I slackline now. Trust me, that didn't happen overnight. The walking the tightrope did not happen overnight. Just standing on it didn't happen overnight. All of these things were progressions because I kept putting myself into a really unstable, new environment. Demand adaptation. 100% believe that if you want to increase your performance almost across the board, but especially in some sport or an activity, put your body in other environments that are completely unstable and that are new to yourself, and allow yourself to progress. That progression in itself will motivate you to stick with it and to really progress. And there is no reward in life like progress. Progress equals happiness. So if you are constantly engaging in something that your body will have to adapt to, I believe you will fundamentally be a much happier person. The dopamine is much better from that as opposed to any of the other activities that I think we were engaging in on a regular, scrolling Instagram, especially, something like that. All right, next quote. We have Thomas Saz, Formerly, when religion was strong and science weak, men mistook magic for medicine. Now, when science is strong and religion weak, men mistake medicine for magic. So true, so true, so true. Those pharmaceuticals, those little pills are not magic, my friends. Your own mind is far more magic than any of the remedies that can be bottled up and sold to you or prescribed to you. Trust me. The things that your mind can accomplish are boundless. That's absolute. Doctors are men who prescribe medicines of which they know little to cure diseases of which they know less in human beings of which they know nothing. Voltaire. Think about that. Nobody knows your situation like you. Nobody. Nobody knows what's actually going on internally all day, every day, and the actions that you're taking and the thoughts that you're having, the environment that you're creating with the beliefs that you have, the thoughts that you're entertaining. These are very important in health. They are absolutely fundamentals for your outlook on life and what you think is going on with yourself. I don't think you can be in a healthy state if you're an angry person. If you're angry at every little thing that happens out to you in public, if somebody cuts you off, if somebody turns in front of you driving, if somebody bumps into you walking down the street, if somebody says something that you disagree with, if you're angry all the time, I don't think you can be a healthy person. If you're taking that anger, resentment into a doctor's office and you're describing some affliction, some symptoms, they're going to prescribe you something that has absolutely nothing to do with your anger issue, with your resentment issue. And we can talk about psychology another time, but there's talking things out definitely has a place in helping yourself or curing an ailment. I don't think the prescriptions do. And I'm not going to go down the wormhole of psychological drugs or mental health afflictions, but your thought processes and your moods and your environment and what you're harboring and what you're harnessing and what your beliefs on the world are, they carry far more weight than what they're given credit for. Far more. Jordan Peterson, is awesome as he is, he's hit on it several times that without aim, without the desire to be a better person, without the desire to fix yourself, then it's irrelevant what your thought on the rest of the world is. You can't fix the rest of the world. You can only fix how you react to the world and the challenges that are presented to you. Voltaire also said the art of medicine consists in amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. We've abandoned that. We've abandoned that almost across the board. You want healing? You believe that you can heal? You have faith that your own internal mechanism, your immune system, you're a magnificent creation, in my opinion, and you can heal from all kinds of things. It's first the desire for healing and the belief in healing, the belief that you can heal, that starts it all. That is that's the fire starter. Believe. They say pray, and I say pray and believe that your prayers have been answered. It's absolutely a miracle. And call it what you want to, but it's what's worked in the past. It is easy to get 1,000 prescriptions, but hard to get one single remedy. Chinese proverb. These are all brilliant quotes. I'm telling you, go get this book. Check it out. Dr. Ken Berry. And if nothing else, just for the quotes at the beginning of every chapter, then the information that he's providing that debunks a narrative that was commonly accepted by the establishment, that doctors have shared over and over and over, to the destruction of some people, to the destruction of their lives. This is a sad subject, and more people need to be aware that this is the reality of where we're at with consensus in this business. Anyways, it is important to keep in mind that our bodies must work pretty well, or there wouldn't be so many humans on the planet. Ina May Gaskin. We are resilient creatures. We are created magnificently. We are resilient. Look, I think if they would have had a kill shot that they could have thrown into the flu shot and knocked out a huge percentage of the population, I believe they would have done it a while back. I do. I believe that the fear mongering that comes across the airwaves is done for a reason, because that has an impact on your health, an impact on how you see the world, an impact on your environment, just as much, if not more in some cases, than the injections of concoctions that I believe are poisonous, that I 100% believe are afflictions upon mankind. I do not believe in the safe and effective. Beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance. Who was that? George Bernard Shaw. Beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. And you hear that statement and you can't conceive it as reality until you know a lot of things that you wish you did. There isn't much that I wish I could go back and unlearn. The things in school, obviously, might be the exception. Some of the programming that was downloaded to me, not by my choice, but by the environment we live in. However, it served me, and the debunking of many of these narratives have served me. I talked about water in the last podcast, and your belief in that matters as well. If you believe you're being poisoned and you still consume these things, perhaps you're poisoning yourself. So we have to have an unsurmountable amount of faith that A, we know we are resilient creatures, and B, we can be drawn up out of affliction, that we can be healed, that we can be remedied of ailments. And maybe we need to think of these things as challenges as well, because that's what life is. Life is a series of challenges, and we all have them. They're all individual. Some of us encounter similar challenges from time to time, and that's why things like this podcast and sharing of information of things that have worked for yourself or others is important. I do believe we need to share with each other all of our triumphs just as much as we share the failures and the challenges in themselves. And we need to have an open mind, because you can learn from everybody. You can learn from everyone. Everybody has something to share, in my opinion, that you can take something away from. And the most insane people of all swear they have it all figured out. The experts and the people that have come to the conclusion they don't need your advice or your history are those that are struggling the most, in my opinion. And they say unsolicited advice is nothing more than criticism. So I'm not going to go out of my way to offer that unsolicited advice on many a subject. But this one here, if you're coming to me, I'm going to be 100% honest. 100% honest. I have no choice but to share the information that I've already come to find was far better than the accepted consensus. Anyways, Lies My Doctor Told Me. Awesome book. And we'll get to more on the subject sooner or later. I'm going to get some more jujitseros in here and talk about their stories and what leaves them, or not leaves them, what fuels them to put themselves in uncomfortable circumstances over and over and over and over again and keep going. That's really important to me. I really want to share that in as many ways and in this form as many times and different ways as possible. But that's it for today. If you are on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification on your various outlet. If you're on Spotify or Apple, subscribe, please. Helps the show out. Thank you very much. This was the Josh Button Podcast. I will see you all again soon. Have a great weekend.